Just so you know, I believe that a counseling relationship can be a powerful catalyst for creating a circumstance that encourages personal development. Getting an outside opinion about how you are living your life can be intimidating, but if done in the correct way, it can initiate tremendous results. Counseling is not necessarily only about processing depression or anxiety. It is about encouraging the creation of the right circumstances to enable change and growth in the individual or couple. But I also believe that part of life is about what you are choosing and what you are taking responsibility for, either too much or not enough. So maybe you aren't ready for counseling, or it truly isn't the right option for you. I think you can still change and grow. You can pursue the right circumstances and see what happens when you tap into the hidden energy reserve or capacity for connection. And with that being read, I want to welcome you back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is a wellness coach, therapist, and XPT trainer. Today's guest is Amy Morrison. Amy, welcome to the 127 Fit podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited that we got to connect today, and I'm excited just to allow you the platform to share your story a little bit and kind of share with the listeners just health and wellness and kind of how you got into that, and just your heart and your passion for helping others. So
yeah, absolutely.
With that being said, I just want to start off with kind of what was the catalyst, Amy, for you to get into the health and wellness field and kind of become a therapist?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the ways that I describe it is from like 2011 to 2014, I worked for Lululemon. So I graduated with my undergraduate degree in 2011 and vowed to never go back to school. Famous last words, right?
Yeah.
And so, because I just was so tired of it and was ready to be done, and decided that I wanted to work part-time at Lululemon, and that ended up being a full-time gig. And while I was there, I was goal coaching people, I was leading people, I was training people, and I was teaching them a lot of different things about the company. And I realized that when I would be in a coaching situation where I would be talking to them about their goals or that kind of thing, I realized like I need more tools. I need more just skills in this toolbox to be able to help people. So that's the way that I describe it, is that I just realized I needed more training. And the reason why I just decided that I loved it so much, so that made me move to Colorado. And then the basis behind why I coach, why I counsel people, is because I love to see people grow, change, and heal. And that has been just one of the coolest things about the last 5 or 6 years, is seeing so many people's journeys towards their own version of what it means like to be the best version of themselves. And I think being a therapist, being a fitness coach, and being an XPT trainer has helped me on that path, because I love having access to all those different tools. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So in regards to being a therapist, now what type of schooling did you go through to become a therapist? And then if you want to just maybe explain to the listeners maybe like what type of therapist you are, because I know there's a handful of different names, yeah. There's different kinds. So if you just kind of want to share about that would be awesome, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I moved out here to Colorado and got my degree from a place called Denver Seminary. So it is, the way I describe it is that it's a counseling degree that happens to be at a seminary. So we have the spirituality focus, on different parts, but we come back to the clinical side, and that's the backbone, is the clinical piece. And that's what's really important to me. And as well as the spirituality side of things, I think it's like 80 to 85% of people identify with some form of religion or spirituality, and so for me, it's really powerful to be able to just, connect with people on that level.
Cool.
And yeah, so that's my degree for my master's.
Okay, very cool. So in regards to kind of like the spirituality in your personal practice as a therapist, is that something that you focus on quite a bit, or is that maybe something you just kind of see kind of where your client is and kind of incorporate it on kind of a certain basis of like kind of what they're dealing with or struggling with, or is it kind of the spiritual part something that you really incorporate on a large end or a large scale with your clients?
Right, so it all depends on what the client needs and wants. With my degree, with the route that I'm going for my licensure, then I have to be focused on the client. I can't bring my own personal biases and beliefs into the counseling room. Obviously, you're not going to be able to just be simply a blank slate for people. That's kind of like the idea behind some counseling theories. But the idea is that you allow them to connect to what they need, as far as therapy goes, and they get to lead it. So my clients, if it is important to them to talk about their spirituality, we talk about it. Mm-hmm. And if it's not, then we don't, and so there may be times where, I will introduce like, oh, is there something related to like, what you mentioned here, as far as like your faith goes, like is there anything that is involved with that? But I really let the client lead. Cool. And, that ties in with, the type of therapy that I do is connected to a lot of mindfulness-based practices. So I do a lot of work with a company called, or not a company, I'm sorry, the certification / style called ACT, and it's essentially acceptance and commitment therapy is the style, that I focus on. And it works a lot with connecting to your pain and connecting to, what that is like, instead of just pushing away these parts of ourselves that we don't enjoy. So that's a very basic explanation of it, but that's a lot of, the type of counseling that I do. And I work with people who have anxiety, some depression. It's not something that I typically treat. A lot of identity, a lot of relationship issues, and I do a lot of coaching as well. So that would be more remote whenever I do coach, and that would be specific skills that people want to develop. Maybe it's mindfulness, maybe it's mental wellness, maybe it's like the physical side as well. So that's what I can focus on with those coaching clients. But counseling clients, I see a wide array of issues in my room.
Okay.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple times just as you were sharing there over the last few minutes the word mindfulness. Would you be able to just maybe explain the meaning behind that for the listener? Because I know that's kind of a
broad term
that's thrown out a lot within health and wellness and counseling.
Absolutely.
And all that. So if you just kind of want to share a little bit more in depth what that means to you or your practice, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So mindfulness is, the way that I describe it is paying attention to the present moment. So there are various ways that you can do that. You can do that through breath work. You can do it through simply just being present and aware. You can do it through walking, meditation, like that kind of thing. I see mindfulness as being a way to just connect to your body, connect to your present surroundings, and connect to the present moment. And a lot of people with anxiety identify with the practice of developing that because for so long they've been focused on what's going to happen in the future or what's already happened in the past. So, mindfulness connects you to the present moment and allows you to be really aware. Okay. I think some people throw around meditation and mindfulness and breath work, and I see meditation being different. I see it being something that allows you to disconnect yourself from your thoughts, and I believe it's almost like an elevated version of mindfulness, because if you have somebody with anxiety and you tell them to like go not have any thoughts for 15 minutes, they're going to be like, okay, I'm just going to think about all the things that are going to come to my mind.
Create more anxiety.
Yeah, it can.
Them, right?
Yeah, absolutely can. So what you can do is teach them how to count their breaths. Teach them what is it like for me to be, present to the seat and my feet on the ground. What is it like to feel my heart beating? That's going to be more of the work that I do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Now, I really want to just try to peel back the layers a little bit in terms of anxiety, because I know for myself personally, I've struggled with anxiety since I was like a tween. I know that anxiety, there's other family members within my own personal family that actually go to counseling for anxiety. So, and I know that you said you have a lot of patients that come in and you work with them in regards to anxiety. So if somebody comes in, and I know we've got to be, kind of generic, but if somebody comes in and they say, hey, Amy, I really struggle with anxiety, what's kind of the process with somebody that says that they have anxiety or they're struggling with anxiety? What's the process that you would kind of start them off with and take them through to kind of start that process of helping them out?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things. Just like a generalized anxiety, disorder. Then what I would do is, get to know them, get connected to a little bit more of the why, because oftentimes it's related to maybe something that happened in their childhood, or it can be just a current life situation that has caused them to have some distress, right? So maybe they lost a loved one, and that might be more of a grief problem, right? That would be more of grief than anxiety, and so it can be different in the way that it expresses itself. So get connected to the why is a big piece of what I do at first, and give them a little bit more awareness of like, hey, like how can we normalize this? What aspects of it can you control? What aspects of it can you not control? And then, get them connected to tools. And mindfulness, like I said, is an amazing tool for that. And it allows people to understand, okay, what do I have control over in this moment or this situation? Thinking a lot about the future or thinking a lot about the past, it's not going to be very helpful, right? So if you can get connected to what can I control in this moment, then that's going to be powerful.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest catalyst that you see with people that come in terms of anxiety? Like kind of what is maybe one thing? Is it kind of the relationships? Is it usually work related? Or is it something outside of that? What would you say that's kind of the biggest
that causes
one?
it?
Yeah, that causes the anxiety.
A lot of it has been just a lifestyle for people. It's the way that they have lived with the world. And, I would say like a typical American culture promotes a more anxious lifestyle, because if you're not moving, then you're not working. If you're not working, then you're not doing. If you're not doing, then you're not like being, right? And so I like to kind of take it back for people and get them more connected to, okay, who are you being? Like, how are you getting connected to the world, right? And so that would be, a piece of the treatment. But I would say it oftentimes stems from some childhood wounds or, a situation, especially a few clients I have right now, it is grief related. So, the anxiety expresses itself in that way, and it oftentimes is about control. So either there's been a loss of control or a loss of an understanding of where their place is in the world, and it's simply just getting connected to what do I have control over, what can I have some awareness of.
So the mind and mindset and thoughts, I'm sure that's probably a big part of what you discuss with your clients, right? Just kind of like where their mind is at,
yes, yeah.
What they're allowing in to their mind, and maybe some of that repetitive thoughts. Is that kind of something?
Yeah, exactly. So something that I talk a lot about with clients, and I give them this almost like a visual, right? And there's a couple different visuals that I do, and I can share them with you today. And one of them is the idea of the anxious thoughts that come in. They are very tricky because they can often look like normal thoughts. And so the way I describe it is like there's a great party in your brain, and there is a guest list, right? And so what you want are the thoughts that are going to be most powerful, in your mind. But the anxious thoughts are dressed up for the party. They're ready to be there. They know exactly what they need to say or do to get entrance in. They are ready to sweet talk that bouncer. Yep. And so what you have to do is just beef up that control mechanism that says, okay, is this thought real? Is this really my identity? Is this who I am? Right? And so that's why a lot of the work we do gets back to the why and gets people back and connected to, who am I in the midst of this? Because if you're letting thoughts in of, that are related to maybe anxiety about your body, then, that can be really detrimental because of the way that you think about yourself.
Right.
And another tool that I use, and this is more based in neurobiology, but is the concept of pathways in our brain. So I describe it like, especially being in Colorado, right? We all know this analogy, but think of it like the pathways in your brain and the pathways to action are really worn out tracks. And a lot of times with anxiety, we have these worn out tracks too. If I feel this emotion, I go straight over to this thought,
Right.
So you run that track really well. And so what we have to do is give you the tools. So put on some heavier hiking boots, put on, grab, something that's going to help you create a path, and you've got to hack your pathway up the mountain, up a different way. So you've got to change the way that you're thinking, and, it's going to be more challenging. It's going to require effort. And for so many people, their pathway to feeling in control is, ruminating and thinking about something a lot. And, that's going to be that pathway that they have to break off that walkway. They need to start walking a different way up the mountain. So
Cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So is there anything in your own personal life that causes anxiety for you? And if so, if you don't mind, just maybe touch on that, and then how I'm assuming you use the tools that you give your clients, but I know sometimes, like, as a personal trainer or somebody in health and wellness, it's sometimes easier for us to help others and then neglect our own well-being. So if you want to just kind of share maybe if there's some anxiety in your life, what maybe causes it, and then how you kind of deal with that yourself on a personal level.
Yeah,
if you don't mind
I'm
sharing,
happy to.
what I mean?
Yeah. So I absolutely deal with anxiety. I'm more of an anxious person than a depressed person. I think we all kind of have a little bit of a tendency because we're all on a spectrum. And so, not that we all have mental disorders, but we all kind of experience some of the symptoms. And, for me, it shows up in a variety of ways. Ruminating thoughts about, like my relationship with my husband, feeling like, oh, okay, am I doing the right thing? Are we in the right place? Are we, that constant chatter in the brain is really overwhelming, right?
Right.
And then I also experience it with my work. And so the way it shows up for me is I'm not good enough.
Right.
I'm not qualified. No one wants to listen to me.
Right.
Which also ties in with the concept of creating stories that aren't real. Right, so we can get into the gray land of what's anxiety, what's storytelling, how are we telling stories to ourselves in our brain, and really creating those pathways to stop that line of thinking. And so for me, what I use a lot is journaling. So I journal. I utilize breath work almost every day. I do some kind of breath work practice because I've experienced the amazing benefits of it and how it can change your brain. And, within 10 minutes of doing breath work, you feel so different.
Right.
So that's something that I utilize for myself. And, those thoughts, and the thing about, anxiety, the thing about ACT, the acceptance and commitment therapy that I do, is the concept of, we get connected to our pain and we get connected to that why, and then we make a commitment out of that, but it doesn't mean that it just simply goes away, right? It's like something I'm going to have to deal with for a while, but I have to build up the strength of my bouncer in my mind, to be able to, turn away those thoughts that just don't belong. They're not a part of me. They're not my identity, and so that's not going to be what's going to be most beneficial to me.
Right.
So,
yeah. I know for me, like I said, I've been struggling with anxiety and probably some sort of obsessive compulsive and just, that kind of that perfectionism thing, whatever.
Yes.
There's a cycle. It's kind of, they intertwine and there's different words that you can use. I've never personally taken any medication or anything, but I know it's a daily process for me to realize that I have control over my own personal thoughts and who I am and how I'm going to act and respond and all of that. But I know that, like, when I was in college and stuff, there were times where there was so much, it felt like there was such a heavy burden, a heavy weight upon my shoulders to the point, and there was so much anxiety, especially for me around, like, working out and my training and stuff, because I was such a perfectionist, and I was just felt so boxed in, and again, that heavy weight, that heavy burden, and it was so strong. And my early 20s, specifically when I was in college, that I didn't even want to get out of bed, like, because I knew mentally what I was going to have to trudge through to make it through that day.
It was so overwhelming.
And it was just crazy. So if what I'm trying to say is, like, I know for me personally, and maybe for a listener or listeners out there that are struggling with anxiety, and you kind of touched on this, it's not just like this, light switch where you flip it up, flip it down, whatever, and you're good to go, or you go see a counselor one time and then you're good to go. It's I know for me it's a daily kind of just battle and struggle and practice to overcome. So
and for me, what's helped me a lot as well is paying close attention to my diet. So what I do is I'm pretty strict with what I let in, right? And so I still drink coffee. I have caffeine. A lot of people do have significant responses to caffeine. And, it's always funny when someone comes to see me for their first counseling session and they're like, I just have this like overwhelming anxiety. And I'm like, how many cups of coffee are you drinking a day? And they're like, 7. And so it's like, well, let's think about that, and so that's where you can get into just an understanding of, okay, how is food impacting my body? And for me, I do have some allergies, and so like I don't do dairy, I don't do wheat, and that actually is hugely powerful for me. I also avoid eating a lot of sugar because we do know that increase in blood sugar and insulin does cause can cause an emotional response in some people, and for me, I am sensitive to sugar, so I have to know that about myself. So getting in touch with what works for me nutrition-wise was huge for my thought processes, because it's wild. Like, I know now, like, so I went to Paris this last year, and everyone told me, they're like, oh, you'll be able to like eat bread and stuff, everything over there, because the wheat is different. And I was like, okay, like I'll try it, and so of course I had like croissants every day for like 2 days. And then my thoughts just got way out of control. And like, for sure, I have a higher sensitivity now because I don't eat it ever. So that happens as well, is that you will increase your sensitivity if you do keep it out of your diet. So for me, I noticed within 12 to 24 hours, wow, my thoughts are like out of control. Like, and those thoughts about my husband, those thoughts about the trip, like thoughts about, oh, are we having enough fun? Are we doing this? And they're doing that. And it's like, that is not who I am. Like, that's not who I want to be, right? And so I had to make the decision that, all right, I got to fight for this gluten-free, trip the rest of the time, for the rest of the trip. And so it actually made it really redeeming, because my husband was so kind and was like, no, of course, like let's focus on, like making sure that you enjoy this trip. And so we would go out of our way to find gluten-free bakeries. Like, yes, they do exist in Paris. And we also had gluten-free pizza, and so that was just really cool. Awesome. And just like, it can be really, I think it can be really empowering, to choose your health and choose your body, because you realize how much it can change the way that you think.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. I want to touch on that, like, body image. I know, I think probably it's fair to say that females, more so than males, struggle with body image. But again, going back to my own personal life and experience, I know from a younger age, and that might have been some of that struggling with anxiety for myself personally, but I know my body image and how I look and how I perceive the way I look plays into a lot of how I feel, the anxiety, and all of that type of stuff. So if you just want to maybe touch on that, Amy, just for a quick minute or so, and just maybe if somebody, male or female, is struggling with that body image, kind of how they can kind of get past that and overcome that hurdle or that obstacle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's very different for everyone, right? But it can look similar as well. And, for me, with my experience of it, I just have to pay really close attention, again, to those thoughts, and, make sure that, I'm not, how do I describe it? Like, so for me, it shows up kind of in waves. Like, it'll come and it'll go. And, you know, I think that's a big piece with body image is it's a continual practice because our bodies are constantly changing. And, you know, especially as we age, like, our bodies, you know, grow and change. And for women, you know, the concept of, you know, maybe if you're going to have kids or, you know, that kind of thing, it can be huge. And so for me, my body image issues, I feel like they really started, I can remember having thoughts about the way I looked as a young girl, and I remember, you know, thinking, I always thought that I wasn't small enough, like thin enough, right? Which is so crazy when you look back and you're like, wait, what? You were like 105 pounds at 14. Yeah. Like, come on. And now, you know, and that shows up in various ways because, you know, I'm fairly tall, I'm athletic, and so I'm not a thin waif person, you know, and so it comes in it for me, like I said, it started kind of in college, and what happened was, and this is how I got actually connected to a lot of different eating styles as well, because I graduated from college, and then I moved to Spain for 3 months and nannied for a family. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you know much about Spain, but like every meal has bread and like chocolate.
That's what I've heard. I've never been there, but I've heard
breakfast
that.
is like I think I can't bocadillo, like they have like, it's literally like bread with chocolate in it. Mm-hmm. It's just like, that's breakfast. And then you have lunch and, you know, whatever it is, and then you have a snack and that's chocolate. It's Nutella and like something. And which is fine, right? It's like kind of the way that they live. But for me, I was also dealing with a lot of homesickness, feeling lonely, and no one I knew spoke my language, and so that was just really challenging. And I think that was one of the first times that I noticed, wow, I'm really seeking comfort in food, you know, and I think it triggered a lot of thoughts around dieting, right? Because growing up, I saw my mom go on a different diet like every week. And, you know, I think she was just doing the best that she could, and I'm not blaming her, but just that beginning view of how do I accept my body for where it is right now. And so that's what's kind of, back then, like around 2011, was when I started, I did my first Whole30 after I moved back because I had gained weight. And at the same time, I was 21, 22, and so your body just changes as a woman at that age. You gain a little bit more weight. You just kind of fill out a little bit more because there's a natural hormone cycle that kind of creates that. So I know I'm kind of going a little bit all in different directions right now, but it's something that is a continual process for me, and I think for people, if you're listening, it can be something that you just continue to practice and continue to learn about yourself, because I know that it begins with radical acceptance, right? And then deciding what can I do, how can I change and grow, right, in a healthy way, because that doesn't just give me I wrote a post about this on social media recently, like, it doesn't just give you a free pass, like, oh, I accept my body so I don't ever have to work out or like eat healthy again, like that's not how it goes. It just means that your mindset is, I'm choosing to be healthy because I see my body as worthy and I see myself as worthy of these things, rather than as like punishment or as something that like I'm working out of this, like, oh, I need to be better, I need to be skinnier, I need to be smaller, it's like no, I want to be healthy, like I want to be stronger, I enjoy working out, it makes me the best person I can be, and so that's the focus.
Cool.
Yeah.
I want to ask you who's one person or maybe a couple people that have most impacted you in your life up to this point?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I would say the top person would probably be my husband, Kyle. He is, honestly, it's so interesting because relationally and personality-wise, we're very, very different. So I can kind of go back into a little bit of background, but like my husband is the oldest of 3 kids, and he's the only boy, so he's got a lot of focus on him, right? There's a lot that Kyle does that his family pays attention to.
Right.
And then conversely, on the other hand, I'm the 5th of 7 kids. I'm the youngest girl, so I have 3 older sisters, and so I adore my family. I love having a big family. It's so much fun, and I think it's been hugely impactful for the way it's developed my personality. And at the same time, you know, you can say like, wow, I love that, and you can also say it caused me to have some unhealthy thought patterns for what I think I'm worthy of. And so I flew under the radar as a kid, you know, and that's the reality. Like, because my mom and my dad were just trying to like make sure everybody, you know, was fed and taken care of, and they, you know, did their best, and they worked really, really hard to make sure that we all felt cared for and loved. And, you know, for me, I think I, at a young age, told myself, like, I don't need help. I don't need attention. I don't need support, right? Because I was like, I'm a confident kid. I can do this. And so my parents were like, okay, great. You go take care of yourself. Go to school, you know, take care of all your things you need to do. And then I realized as I grew into an adult, that doesn't really serve you super well if you want to have intimate relationships. So my sweet husband, our first year of marriage was rough, right? Because gosh, we slammed up against that so many times, because all I wanted to do was push him away. I was like, no, family means you leave me alone and I do my own thing. And he's like, that's not how things work. Like, you know, we have to have intimacy, we have to have closeness. And that's something I tell my clients all the time is you need differentiation, right? You need to have your own thing, you need to grow separately, you know, to avoid that codependence. And you also need intimacy, you need closeness, you need to develop that connection together. And so he has been so powerful in my life for just pushing into that intimacy, you know, that pushing into, we need to be close, we need to like have this connection. And that's honestly, I think changed my life, and I'm really grateful for him.
That's beautiful. That's great. I know whenever I have a guest on that's married and stuff, that's something I usually try to bring up, because for me personally, marriage is something that's very sacred, and it's kind of in a weird place in our culture, in our country now. A lot of people have a lot of different opinions about that, but every time that I brought that up on the podcast, the people that are obviously married, they have nothing but great things to say. And obviously they're probably not going to say anything bad on a podcast, but it's always interesting for me just to hear how much marriage changes an individual, because it seems like it's a very humbling experience, a very humbling process, and you really find out a lot more about yourself as maybe opposed to finding out more about the person that you marry. You really, it's kind of like a mirror, and you're looking in the mirror. So
they're holding up a mirror, and sometimes the picture is not pretty.
Right. Yep.
And you're like, no, like, let's push that away. I don't want to see it. And it's so necessary. Cool. And I think like I really value marriage, you know, and, you know, I don't think everybody needs to get married.
Right.
Like, that's not the way that I roll, but I think it's amazing, like, what you do learn in a committed relationship with somebody. And, you know, when you have that deep level of intimacy that you're developing, right? I in no way have it all figured out. You know, we still argue, we still, you know, get frustrated with each other, but I think if you put in the work to choose each other and choose, like, okay, I want to make sure that we communicate the best that we can, then you're gonna see amazing benefits for yourself, especially if you focus on that connection, intimacy and differentiation. You know, and the way that I describe that concept to clients is like, if you were gonna, like, you know, see something in you know, just a room, right, and it was like, maybe it was a green basket, a woven basket, and you saw it across the room, but as you walked closer, you saw that it's actually yellow and blue woven together, and so they're still very separate, but they create a really useful and powerful tool, you know, that can be used, you know, for other people. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to touch on one other thing here, and then I want to kind of transition into maybe the XPT trainer,
Yeah.
and let you share a little bit about that and dig deeper into that. But before we do, I want to kind of go back to community, and we were just talking about connection in regards to husband and wife and marriage and things of that nature, but just share a little bit with the listeners, Amy, about community connection and interaction and the importance of those in somebody's health and wellness.
Absolutely.
Because I know in our culture and in the world, we are more connected than ever through social media, through the technology, but there seems to be a greater amount of anxiety, a greater amount of mental disorders, because yes, we are more connected than ever through the technology, but I know for myself, being a teacher for middle school and high schoolers, these kids, they know how to interact through a phone or through a screen, but they can't look you in the eyes and have human interaction. They're always looking at the screen if they have one, or they're looking down at the floor, they're looking away. So just would you talk about community connection and interaction and how valuable that is and how important that is to have that, to foster that for health and wellness in an individual's life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what immediately comes to mind is that study after study has been done on the power of connection and intimacy in relationship and longevity. Right. So we know that even if somebody is living a very unhealthy lifestyle, if they are in a relationship with someone and they are experiencing connection in some way and they are avoiding that loneliness, they will live longer than somebody who is living alone. So somebody who's like the healthiest eater and they work out all the time. If you are lonely, if you don't have that connection and that community, you will have a shorter lifespan. So that's what first comes to mind. And especially for fitness, what comes to mind in that realm is the fact that we need accountability.
Right.
We need other people, I think, in order to be our best version
Absolutely.
of ourselves. We need somebody who can look into our eyes and say, hey, how are things going?
Right.
How are you feeling, right? And that is the power of counseling, of the relationship, of, the connection to a trainer. That's what causes change, is the relationship. That's what has been proven over and over again. So I think that's something that's really cool. And, coming to the connection piece, I see it too. I have a couple of teenage clients, and they are so good at talking to everybody on Snapchat.
Right.
But then you ask them, well, what is it like to talk to them in person? They're like, oh, no, I don't talk to boys in person. And you're like, well, why? And they're like, well, they don't talk to me, and I won't talk to them, but we FaceTime almost every night. And then, or we Snapchat. We have a Snapchat streak that's 2 months long or something. And I'm just like, okay. So this is a more systemic issue, and I think, unfortunately, I think sometimes trends in either the media or, in our culture have to go through a cycle, and so
Right.
people have to see the results of choosing that much screen time, choosing that much free reign on social media or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a tool, right? It can be used for power, it can be used for connection,
Yep.
that's how you and I met, and it can be used as a crutch, right? If that was the
Absolutely.
only way that I communicated with my spouse or my friends, we wouldn't go very far.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's so much that we miss without the without those nonverbal cues.
Right.
And I think that's why it's so much easier to bully people online as well, because you don't see you're not able to kind of create that empathic response of, ooh, those words really cut close to that person, because you saw the social, I can't think of the word right now, but
Maybe consequences.
yeah, the
or
consequences. Yeah, the ramifications. Of what happens when you do speak to someone in that way. So, kind of went all over the place with that. Do you feel like you answered your question?
Yeah, no, that's good. Just the community connection and interaction. I know, from the research I've heard and just my continued learning and stuff, those community connection interaction are some people say just as important, if not more important, like you touched on a few minutes ago, the physical exercise and eating healthy and all that. If you don't eat the best, you don't really move a whole lot, but if you really have an intimate relationship or a strong community around you, that's super powerful, and it can be greater than the exercise and the eating healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's cool. Thank you. So I just want to transition now into another tool that you have in your life, and that's being an XPT trainer.
Yeah.
I did a little. I've followed Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese on Instagram. Brian McKenzie's another one I think that's connected with XPT. I follow several people on Instagram that do the training. So it stands for Extreme Performance Training, and if you just kind of want to peel back some of the layers of that, what that means to you, and just kind of how you got into that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So, XPT is a holistic training and mindset and company around the concepts of breath, movement, and recovery. And breath is always first because it translates into everything that we do. We're always doing it, and so we might as well be doing it well, right? And the way I got connected to it, I went out to an experience in the summer of 2017. Yeah, 2017. And and that's how I got connected to the XPT crew. I actually won the trip on Instagram.
Sweet.
You had to enter in and say why you should be chosen, and so it was so strange. I was telling someone about it last night, and I was like, I had a feeling when I applied. I was like, I'm gonna win this. I was like, this is gonna be something I win.
That's not a bad deal.
Yeah, and so I won a spot and got to go out to Montauk, New York, Long Island, and meet the crew. I met Gabby and Laird, and I don't know if you know PJ Nestler and
I've
Andy
heard
Galpin.
of them.
Yeah, they were all there. Cool. And there's a few other trainers that are really amazing. Brian Diaz and Donna Diaz are amazing as well. And so that's how I got connected to it. After that, I basically just stayed in contact with PJ, and Jen is one of the managers, behind XPT, and essentially I just kept annoying them. I was like, so guys, what's up? How's it going? I want to come help. Can I come? Can I come see you? And they were, they decided that they wanted to a while ago, but they had started the process of developing a coaching certification. So they had their first one, I believe, in March in LA, and I got invited out to go to that one. And so I went out to that one, became one of the first XPT coaches, and essentially it just... And from the start, right, from Montauk, I learned so much in those couple of days that I was immediately, I realized wow, this is the direction I want to go with the way that I train people. Mm-hmm. And it was connected so deeply to that holistic mindset, because what I do now is so in line with the vision I had for myself when I graduated with my master's degree. And because I was like, okay, I know that I care a lot about physical health, nutrition and fitness and movement and mindset and all that, and I care a lot about mental health, right, and mental wellness. And so I'm like, I'm going to figure out a way to bridge the two. I'm going to figure out a way to connect the two. And most recently, in the last year or so, breath has been the biggest part for me, and that's such a huge piece of the XPT brand and mindset is the breath work. And I will say, Gabby Laird and Brian McKenzie did start it all together, but Brian McKenzie now does his own thing. He works with a company called Power Speed Endurance, and that's a company that he started. Okay. There's no bad blood. They just decided to kind of do their own thing. And so that, the breath work is part of what I do really does stem from XPT. And, so when I see a client for personal training, then it's something that always comes up. What does your CO2 tolerance look like? How are you breathing on a regular basis? Are you breathing in and out through your nose? Are you taking big gasping breaths through your mouth as soon as you begin warming up for a workout, right? Because if they're for most people, I would say there is some kind of disordered breathing pattern, just because it's a system that's kind of been reinforced in our American culture. We're kind of hunched over at desks, and so the body is going to find a way to breathe no matter what, even if you put it in a really uncomfortable position. Right. Then you're still going to find a way to breathe, and so that's not necessarily the most optimal way. But yeah, I will say with XPT, breath work is one of the biggest things. There's also the concept of recovery, and so a piece of that is the contrast therapy. So getting into an ice bath, getting into a sauna, doing both kind of back and forth, to kind of create that recovery pathway for people. And it's a great way to practice the breath work because you're put into a stressful situation, both in the heat and in the ice. Not many people are put into a space of discomfort, right? We live in kind of a 60 degree, 70 degree environment, in our houses, and we go from the house to the car, and the steering wheel heats up, and I don't have that.
Climate control, right?
Yeah, everything is climate controlled, and so the cool thing about XPT is that it's for everybody, and it puts people outside of their comfort zones and really teaches them where they can push their boundaries, which is cool.
Sweet.
And that's going to be different for everybody, right? It doesn't mean that you have to be an extreme athlete to be able to do the work. It's for everyone. Anybody can do it because we all need help understanding where those boundaries are for us.
Cool.
Yeah.
What's with XPT, because I know on Instagram I see a lot of times people at the bottom of like a pool or something with dumbbells in their hands.
Absolutely.
So and obviously Laird being a big wave surfer and all of that type of stuff, I'm sure water is something that he's very fond of. But what is all of that about? Like being at the bottom of a pool with dumbbells, is that kind of a big part of the physical training in XPT?
Yeah, so that's a part of the movement training.
Okay.
And so the pool training that happens with XPT is so unique. I love it. Everybody who does an experience or a workshop where there is, so every experience has the pool training, and Gabby does an amazing job of teaching that. And some workshops will have a pool, and so you do pool training, but what it is it's a different way to train your body and use weights. And the cool thing is that I think PJ talked about this recently, that it has been shown to actually be a little bit better than land at increasing performance and increasing power, which is pretty cool to see because it actually is a really safe way for you to train with weight.
Absolutely.
Because you are, coming through the water whenever you land, and it's, giving you that compression right with the water, and it's making your landing so much softer, which is cool. And I keep saying "and," but
no,
it's like
good.
I'm so
You're
excited
good.
about it. The neat thing is that it again puts people out of their comfort zones, and they realize, wow, this is such a different way to train, and it's really good for my joints. It's not going to tear my body apart, which I think so many training mechanisms in the last 5 to 10 years have encouraged a lot of that, and they haven't done as good a job of talking about recovery and talking about ways that you can recover with movement, and so movement has been about not hurting myself, but kind of pushing myself and grinding down to the bone, right? And that's not how it has to be, right? It can be a simple movement, in the water, or it can be out of the water. It can be, a class where you don't leave dripping in sweat and feeling exhausted, right? Because
it can be enjoyable, right?
It can be enjoyable.
Exercise and movement should be enjoyable.
Miserable when you're working out, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I love to preach to clients, and even on social media, is like, figure out what's fun for you. And like that's part of what I really love XPT, because you get to do so much movement and so many different exercises, or learning how to breathe, or learning what it's like to recover, that you wouldn't normally get to experience. So yeah,
cool. And I know we got to wrap things up here. You've got another appointment here soon.
Yeah,
so
no worries.
Is there anything kind of just closing shop for the day? Is there anything that you would like to share that I haven't asked you, or maybe something that's just in your heart, something that you're super passionate about right now, you're learning, that you just kind of like to throw out there and give to the listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing that comes to my mind is that, maybe you connected to something in this podcast, maybe you didn't, but the best thing you can learn is that there's not just one way to heal, grow, and change, right? There's so many different pathways, especially now. You can figure out what needs to happen in order for you to be the best person you can be. And maybe it's seeing a therapist, maybe it's seeing a coach, maybe it's just talking to somebody who can help, maybe it's going to a group fitness class and making some connections. But I think that there's so many different pathways that people can learn about themselves, and the most important thing is that you just figure out what works for you. Like, you just figure out what you need to do to be consistent, and that's going to be what causes the change. Your consistency and your ability to just choose your health is going to be what changes your life.
Awesome. Very good. Amy, I just want to give you a minute or two here just to kind of share if people want to connect with you, if they want to reach out to you, if they want to find out more about the XPT training that you do here in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah.
Your services in regards to counseling. Go ahead, just kind of share where people can get connected with you more if they're interested.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website, truecorehealth.com. Everything is spelled correctly. Some people, asking, is there an E in true? And I'm like, yes. I don't know why. That's the pet peeve. So truecorehealth.com, and then Instagram is just at truecorehealth. And then if you want to get, in contact with me and you don't really care to look at my website or look at my Instagram, just Amy at truecorehealth.com. That's a great way to get in contact with me, and we can figure out what works for you. If you need a trainer, if you need a counselor, if you need, if you need just somebody to talk to about, your goals, or if people want a, similar career to what I'm doing, I'm happy to talk with anybody about it.
Great.
Because, there's always going to be room for more. I'm happy to share what I am learning because I'm so passionate about collaboration. I don't care about competition. There's so many people to help, right? We need to help as many people as possible. So there's room. There's room for anybody who wants to join.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I want to ask you one more thing really quickly.
Yeah.
In Denver specifically, what's maybe one of your favorite places to go, walk around, whatever? Is there a favorite kind of place in Denver that you can think of off the top of your head that...
Ooh, like nature-wise?
Just whatever. Maybe it's a restaurant, maybe it's somewhere that you and your husband really enjoy hanging out, something like that. If somebody's going to come to Denver and maybe they'll be like, hey, I want to go check that place out.
Oh, absolutely. So I live over by Sloan's Lake, so I love that. I love walking on the lake. I love Pearl Street in the south. I think it's really fun. And visiting Boulder is really fun as well.
Boulder's awesome. Yeah.
I think, can be great to visit. I don't think I've ever lived there, but it could be a good place to visit. And, I think... what else comes to my mind? Like Tennyson Street is really fun. There's so many cool little fitness things popping up around as well. I love just going to different studios and new places. So
cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, listeners, that's going to be everything for today. I just want to let you guys know if you want to reach out to me, Instagram is at 127fitness. Facebook is at Quentin Vars, and I also have a page for 127 Fitness. That's at 127 Fitness. My website, which is just my blogs, it's 127fitness.com. And if you guys could please like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, leave a review, that would really be helpful, especially for iTunes. And if you guys are interested in being a guest or anything of that nature, on the 127fit podcast, you can email me at 127fit@gmail.com. And again, Amy, I just want to thank you very much for hanging out with me today and just sharing a little bit of your story. I know that there's going to be some listeners that are going to connect really well with some of the thoughts that you shared. So I just, again, thank you a lot for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
For
I feel
sure.
honored. Thank you.
Yeah. And I just also want to give a shout out to Just Be Kitchen. We are sitting in the patio outside behind Just Be Kitchen, and they are a sweet little restaurant here in downtown Denver. So if you're ever in Denver, check out Just Be Kitchen. Gluten-free, grain-free, sugar-free food. So I just want to give a shout out to them and thank them for allowing us to chill on their outdoor patio. And if you guys heard a little bit of chatting outside of Amy and myself, or heard some of the wind blowing, I just said we're outside. We're just doing what we got to do to get the podcast in. So just going with the flow. I love it. Keeping it real. I am going to leave you guys with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time, till next time, I'll catch you guys later.